All right, so we're diving deep into some spoken English phrases today, and looks like you really want to get under the hood of these expressions.
Yeah, it's like you want to do more than just understand the words. You want to really feel them, you know?
Exactly. And I gotta say, we've got some pretty interesting ones to work with here. Let's see, it's out of your scope. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, that one's a good one.
That's a pretty direct way of putting things right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting about this phrase is that it can sound polite, but it's also super
It's
assertive.
setting a boundary.
It is. It is. It's like saying, hey, this is not your responsibility,
Yeah.
but in a way that's not, totally shutting the person down.
Right. Not aggressive, but not passive either.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
where you're being clear and firm, but not coming across as rude or dismissive.
Yeah. Now another phrase we have here is get off my back, what are you urging for? And this one has a very different vibe. Oh yeah, this one's way more emotionally charged, right? You can almost hear the frustration in the person's voice.
There's definitely some tension there.
Yeah, it's like they've had enough, they're feeling pressured, maybe even a little bit attacked, and they're pushing back.
So it's interesting to see how both of these phrases deal with power dynamics, but in very different ways.
Right. One is more about setting boundaries, and the other one is about pushing back against pressure or demands.
Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Here's one that made me smile. We are trying to hug him, but he growled at us, so it's better if you may do it.
Huh. That sounds like someone's got a feisty pet.
Right. I mean, who are we talking about here? A cat? A dog?
But even with this humorous situation, there's still a kind of subtle power dynamic at play here.
Right.
I see what you mean. Yeah, because they're not saying, hey, you hug him. They're saying, it's better if you may do it.
Exactly. It's like a
Mhm.
very indirect request. It's
Yeah.
almost like they're trying to persuade the other person to do something that might be a little bit dangerous. Yeah. Like, hey, if you're feeling brave.
Haha, exactly.
Hmm.
So even in this casual, funny situation, we can see how English speakers use language to kind of navigate these tricky social situations.
It's all about being polite, but still getting your point across. Okay, ready for another one? This one's super relatable, I think. My hair looks so choppy.
Oh, we've all been there, right?
Hmm.
The pain of a bad haircut.
Ugh, tell me about it. But what I find interesting about this phrase is how just that one word choppy immediately paints a picture in your mind.
It really does, doesn't it? It's not just saying that the hair is uneven. It's like you can almost feel the scissors hacking away at your hair and you can see those jagged ends.
Like you almost feel the disappointment too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about English. It's got so many descriptive words that really bring those sensory experiences to life.
All right, this next phrase is definitely on the more, let's say, playful side. No matter how bad we smell, it's still way less than you guys.
Okay, so someone's definitely teasing their friends here, right?
Yeah. But what I find interesting is the exaggeration. It's like they're not just saying we don't smell as bad. They're taking it to the extreme.
Right. And that's what we call hyperbole in English. It's a way of emphasizing a point or making a joke by exaggerating things.
And it's super common in spoken English.
It is. It's like a way of adding a little bit of humor and personality to your language.
Okay, let's shift gears again to something a little more introspective. How about, I'm a bit foggy now. What'd you think of that one?
Foggy, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting example of how English uses metaphors to describe mental states.
Because obviously our brains aren't literally filled with fog, but it's a really effective way to describe that feeling of confusion or haziness.
Exactly. And it's not just foggy. We use all sorts of metaphors like this in English. We talk about feeling bright when we're happy or down when we're sad.
Heavy-hearted, lighthearted, yeah, there's a lot.
Exactly. And these metaphors really help us to communicate our emotions in a way that's relatable and vivid.
It's like it gives people a way to grasp what you're feeling, even if they haven't experienced it themselves.
Exactly. Now, having said that, I think it's also important to be aware of using metaphors that are too cliche.
Like sometimes you want to go beyond the usual, I'm feeling blue or I'm so stressed out.
Exactly. It's a good challenge to try and come up with your own metaphors sometimes. It's like flexing your creative muscles.
Right. Makes you think a little deeper about what you're actually trying to say.
Oh.
Okay, now for something we can probably all relate to. I put in a lot, but all in vain.
Ugh. Yeah, that feeling of putting in a ton of effort and getting nothing in return.
Yeah, totally frustrating. And this is also a great example of an idiom. Right.
Exactly. Idioms are those phrases where the meaning isn't immediately obvious from the individual words. Like you can't really translate all in vain word for word and get the same meaning.
This whole expression.
Exactly. And idioms like this are super common in spoken English. They add color, they add personality, and they make you sound more like a native speaker.
All right, here's another one that's all about work, but this time it focuses on explaining something. So basically, they split this department into a separate one. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty clear and straightforward way of explaining something that might be kind of complex, like splitting up a department that can involve a lot of moving parts.
It could be
It
confusing.
can be, yeah. But the speaker here is using language that's really accessible and easy to understand.
And I noticed they used the word basically in there.
Hmm.
Do you think that serves a purpose, or do you think it's kind of like a filler word?
Yeah, basically, that's a really interesting word, and you hear it a lot in spoken English. It can be kind of a filler word, but it can also be used to like soften the language, make it sound less formal and more conversational.
Right, like, I'm just giving you the gist of it.
Exactly. It's a way of saying, here's the main point without getting bogged down in all the details. And then we also have pantry.
Ah, that's a classic example of how English adapts to different environments, right? It's
Yeah.
like we borrow words and create our own little office jargon.
It is. And jargon can be really confusing if you're not familiar with it, but it's also a way for people within a particular group to communicate more efficiently.
Like a shorthand.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to a phrase that touches upon some pretty sensitive cultural issues. They're just trying to obscure the Chinese elements and hide the fact that China owns the festival.
Whoa, yeah, this is definitely getting into the territory of cultural appropriation.
It is, and it's a really important issue to be aware of. This phrase highlights the need to be respectful of other cultures and to acknowledge the origins of cultural practices and traditions.
You can really hear the concern in the speaker's voice, like they feel like something valuable is being misrepresented or exploited.
Right, and I think it's important to remember that language can be a powerful tool for both good and bad. It can be used to promote understanding and respect, but it can also be used to perpetuate stereotypes and misinformation.
Okay, here's another phrase that deals with differing opinions. Some people's attitudes are still way behind.
So there's a sense of judgment here, right? Like the speaker is saying that someone is out of touch or resistant to progress.
And it's interesting how they use the word behind. It's like they're implying that there's a right way to think and everyone else needs to catch up.
Right. It's a pretty strong statement. And it really highlights how language can be used to express our values and beliefs.
And sometimes those values and beliefs can clash with others, which leads to conflict.
Exactly. And here's a phrase that really captures that feeling of being in the minority. If I say something that goes against everyone's opinion, then you all will come to me and preach to me.
Wow, you can really feel the frustration in that one. Like they feel like they can't express themselves without being attacked or shut down.
Right. And I think this speaks to the importance of creating spaces where people feel safe to share their opinions, even if they're unpopular.
Absolutely. It's about respecting different viewpoints and being willing to listen to each other. Okay, let's move on to a phrase that's a little less serious. Take a gamble, huh?
Uh-huh. I love that little huh at the end.
It totally changes the tone, right?
It does. It's like it turns a statement into a question, Like
Okay.
they're inviting the other person to weigh in on the decision.
What do you think? Should we risk it?
Yeah, exactly. And these little tag questions are super common in spoken English. They're a way of making the conversation more interactive and engaging.
It's like you're not just talking at someone, you're talking with them.
Right. And then speaking of engaging with others, here's a phrase that's all about offering support. At least you won't be totally lost.
Oh, that's nice. It's
Yeah.
a little bit of reassurance.
Yeah.
Like saying, hey, it might be tough, but you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about showing empathy and letting someone know that you're there for them. And sometimes just a few words of encouragement can make all the difference.
Okay, time for some phrases about communication styles. First up, we're in sync. What do you think about that one?
In sync. Yeah, it's like being on the same wavelength as someone. Right.
It's like you're not just understanding the words they're saying, but you're also picking up on their nonverbal cues and their tone of voice.
You're in tune with each other, and sometimes you can be in sync with someone without even saying much of anything. You just get each other.
Like you can anticipate what the other person's going to say or do.
Exactly. Now, here's another phrase that hints at the importance of nonverbal communication. That's why I didn't respond right away.
Yeah. I think this one's interesting because it suggests that sometimes it's okay to take a pause before you respond to someone.
Absolutely. And it can be really powerful to take a moment to collect your thoughts before you speak, especially if it's a sensitive or emotionally charged situation.
It shows that you're actually listening and considering what the other person's saying.
Exactly. Now, here's a phrase that promotes a really positive communication style. Feel free to chime in if you have something to add.
I love this one. It's so welcoming and inclusive.
Yeah.
It creates a space where everyone feels like they can contribute.
Right. It's about encouraging participation and making sure that everyone feels heard. Okay, let's jump into the digital age with this one. Recommend me a couple of songs you really like.
Oh yeah, gotta love a good music recommendation.
It's a classic conversation starter. Music is such a powerful way to connect with people, and sharing recommendations is a great way to discover new artists and genres.
It's a window into someone's taste.
It is, and it can lead to some really interesting conversations. Now, this next one made me chuckle. It was all right, just the usual basic stuff and nothing special.
Haha. Yeah, that's a perfect example of classic English understatement.
It is. It's
Yeah.
like they're downplaying the situation, even though they might have actually had a good time. It's a way of being humble, or maybe even a little bit ironic.
Right, like they don't want to brag or make a big deal out of it. Okay, here's a phrase that shows how technology is constantly changing the way we speak. One power strip has multiple outlets.
It's a simple statement, but it reflects how our language adapts to new inventions and concepts.
Right. We need new words to describe these new things. And it's amazing how quickly those words become part of our everyday vocabulary.
It is. It's like language is a living, breathing thing that's constantly evolving. And then we have open my phone and then lose my focus and get distracted. All right. Oh.
Oh, the struggle's real, right?
I think we can all relate to this one. The digital world is full of distractions, and it can be so easy to lose track of time and get sucked into our phones. But it's important to be mindful of our tech usage and to create boundaries so that we don't let it take over our lives.
Absolutely. Okay, for our final set of phrases, let's explore some observations about culture and society. First up, it could fall through. What do you think of that one?
It's interesting how this phrase combines a common idiom, fall through, with a very specific cultural context.
Right, like it's talking about a business failing, which is something that people from all cultures can relate to.
Exactly. And it shows how idioms can be really powerful tools for communicating complex ideas in a concise and memorable way.
Now, here's a phrase that touches upon another aspect of culture, specifically body image. My friends who work out well and maintain a good physique.
Yeah, this one brings up some interesting questions about beauty standards and the pressure to look a certain way.
And it also highlights how language can be used to both describe and reinforce those standards.
Exactly. It's a reminder to be mindful of the language we use when talking about bodies and appearances, and to make sure that we're promoting a positive and inclusive message.
All right, and last but not least, we have the prevalence of English.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really thought-provoking phrase. It makes you think about the global impact of the English language.
Right. English is spoken all over the world, and it's become the language of business, science, and diplomacy. But it also raises questions about cultural dominance and the potential loss of other languages.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with both positive and negative aspects.
Wow, that was quite a journey through everyday English.
It was. We explored phrases related to power dynamics, social situations, emotions, work, culture, and even technology.
And what I think is so cool is that all of these phrases, they're not just random words strung together. They reflect the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we interact with the world around us.
It's true. Language is more than just a tool for communication. It's a window into our minds and our culture.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't just learn the words, learn the stories behind them.
Exactly. Pay attention to the nuances, the context, the emotions. That's how you really make English your own.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep those ears open and keep exploring the fascinating world of spoken English.